Someone once asked me, "What if your worst enemy dropped sugar into your cup?" I said, "Then my drink would still be sweet." He smiled and said, "And what if he dropped poison instead? Then I'd be finished." He nodded and said, "Exactly. It doesn't matter who drops it, even your best friend, the effect will be same." That's how the mind works. It doesn't care whether the thought came from a friend, a stranger, or a screen. Once it enters, it begins to shape you. That's why you must protect the gates of your mind. Don't let anyone pour bitterness, fear, or limitation into your cup. Because what fills your mind today will quietly build your tomorrow. The mind is the most fertile soil in existence. Whatever you plant in it, weeds or wisdom, will grow. And most people, without realizing it, leave the gates open. They allow gossip to take root, fear to sprout, and doubt to multiply. They feed their mind with noise and wonder why peace never grows. Every word you hear, every thought you entertain, every image you hold, these are seeds. Some build, others destroy. Some heal, others wound. The danger is that the mind makes no distinction between them. It grows what it's given. That is why a single negative idea, once believed, can shrink a person's entire life. Every great downfall begins with a thought accepted without question. A woman convinced she is not capable stops trying. A man told he's reached his limit stops growing. Entire lives are shaped not by truth, but by the quiet poison of belief. But the opposite is also true. The same mind that can be poisoned can also be purified. The same gates that let darkness in can guard the light. When you begin to choose what enters your thoughts, when you become the gatekeeper instead of the victim, everything changes. Protecting the mind is not isolation. It is awareness. It's not about hiding from the world, but choosing what from the world deserves a place within you. You cannot stop words from being spoken, but you can stop them from taking root. You cannot control every influence, but you can decide which ones you allow to stay. The most powerful people in history, men and women alike, were not those who had the loudest voices, but those who had the strongest filters. They learned that peace and purpose do not come from more information, but from better selection. They guarded their thoughts as carefully as others guard their treasure, for they knew that one careless idea can bankrupt a lifetime of effort. Your mind is your most sacred possession. It will either work for you or against you, depending on what you allow through its gates. If you wish to change your life, begin there. Stand guard at the doorway of your thoughts. Choose what you allow in, because the mind remembers and it obeys. For in the end, it is not the world that shapes you, it is what you accept from it. The power of influence, how ideas shape identity and destiny. Every life, no matter how grand or simple, begins in thought. Every action is a descendant of an idea. Every habit, every belief, every result, all can be traced back to something first accepted by the mind. That is the true power of influence. It doesn't strike the body. It enters quietly through the mind, and once inside, it builds the person you become. We often underestimate this. We imagine influence as something obvious, a voice shouting, a command forcing action. But real influence is silent. It moves through words spoken casually, opinions repeated often, and suggestions heard when your guard is down. Over time, these small ideas begin to gather weight. They form convictions, shape choices, and eventually define character. That's why the greatest victories and the worst defeats are both born from the same soil, thought. The woman who builds a beautiful life began by believing she could. The man who destroys his own potential began by believing he couldn't. The mind obeys the pattern it accepts, and the world follows. Most people live unguarded, not realizing that ideas are like guests. Once welcomed, they begin to rearrange the furniture. Invite fear, and it will paint your walls gray. Welcome resentment, and it will turn the room cold. Let in doubt, and it will quietly lock all the doors of opportunity. But open your mind to faith, gratitude, and purpose, and suddenly the same world feels wide and full again. You see, no one escapes influence, but everyone chooses it. The question is not whether you are being shaped, but by what. The voices you listen to, the ideas you repeat, the thoughts you tolerate, these are the architects of your destiny. If you study the lives of the most fulfilled people, you will find they were not born fearless or brilliant. They simply chose their influences carefully. They surrounded themselves with clarity, discipline, and principle. They read, listened, and spoke in ways that strengthened their direction. They understood that the mind, like a river, must be guided. Otherwise, it floods everything it touches. But those who fail to guard their thoughts become servants to them. They let the world tell them who they are, what is possible, and what they deserve. They do not notice that each borrowed idea comes with a cost, a piece of their identity. The longer they live on secondhand beliefs, the further they drift from their own truth. The danger is not the bad idea shouted loudly. It's the small, careless one that slips in quietly and stays. It becomes habit, it becomes attitude, and finally, it becomes identity. This is why influence must be chosen with care. Every book you read, every conversation you keep, every thought you repeat, each is shaping the structure of your mind. The results may not show today, but they will tomorrow. The secret of every strong mind is simple. They know what to let in and what to leave out. They do not entertain what weakens them. They do not argue with what offends their purpose. They know that what the mind dwells upon, the life becomes. Because influence, once accepted, becomes identity. And identity once formed becomes destiny. How to guard the mind, building awareness and control. The first duty of every human being is not to control the world, it is to control the mind, for the outer world is merely the echo of the inner. Guard the mind and life begins to align. Neglect it, and even the brightest opportunities turn dark. Guarding the mind does not mean living in fear of thought. It means living in awareness of it. It means knowing what enters, what stays, and what silently begins to grow roots. Because most people don't lose control all at once. They lose it thought by thought. A careless word plants irritation. A repeated worry becomes a habit. A small self-doubt, unchallenged, becomes identity. Awareness is the first gatekeeper. It asks, what am I allowing in? Not everything that sounds true deserves belief. Not every opinion deserves residence in your mind. You must choose your mental company as carefully as you choose your friends. For once an idea enters and takes hold, it will build a world around itself, one you will have to live in. So how does one guard the mind? It begins with observation. Watch your thoughts as you would watch a crowd pass through a gate. You cannot stop them from appearing, but you can decide who enters. You can greet them without obeying them. You can notice them without nourishing them. The second act of control is selection. The mind is not meant to be a storage room for everything you encounter. It is meant to be a workshop for what you value. Let only those thoughts remain that serve your peace, your growth, and your integrity. Everything else is noise, and noise left unchecked becomes confusion. The third act is discipline. Feed your mind as carefully as you would feed your body. If you consume nothing but bitterness, your thoughts will grow heavy. If you feed on constant worry, your spirit will weaken. But if you nourish the mind with wisdom, gratitude, and learning, it becomes steady, immune to the chaos around it. And finally, there is renewal. Guarding the mind is not a single act. It is a lifelong habit. Every day, the world will try to enter, through conversations, through headlines, through the words of others. You cannot shut it all out, but you can decide what lingers. Renewal means clearing out what no longer belongs, old fears, outdated opinions, borrowed limitations. Men and women of strength are not those untouched by life's noise. They are those who have learned how to hear without absorbing, how to see without surrendering, how to stand still while the world rushes past. To guard your mind is to guard your destiny. It is to recognize that you are the final authority on what shapes you. And when you master that, when you learn to choose your thoughts with the same care a sculptor chooses his tools, your life becomes deliberate. Because awareness is freedom, and control is peace. No one can disturb a mind that knows how to guard its own gates. The cost of neglect, how the unguarded mind destroys potential. Every person begins life with immense potential, a mind vast, capable, and creative. But potential, left unguarded, decays. The mind, like a great city, must be defended. For if its gates are left open, anything can enter, and sooner or later, something harmful will. Neglect begins subtly. A man stops questioning what he hears. A woman starts believing every doubt that crosses her mind. Slowly, their thoughts begin to lose strength. They stop choosing what to think and start absorbing what is given. And just like that, the most powerful instrument in the universe, the human mind, becomes passive. An unguarded mind is not empty. It's overcrowded. Overcrowded with opinions, worries, comparisons, and noise. And when the mind is full of noise, clarity dies. The first cost of neglect is confusion. Without discipline, thoughts collide and compete. The person begins to think in circles, wanting one thing, fearing another, doubting both. They work hard but without direction. They chase movement instead of meaning. And soon, even small decisions feel heavy because they've lost the inner order that brings peace. The second cost is fear. Fear thrives in the unguarded mind because it has no filter. Every worry becomes a threat. Every obstacle looks like disaster. The unguarded mind believes everything it imagines, and imagination, left untrained, is a dangerous master. The third cost is limitation. Negativity does not merely cloud judgment. It shrinks what is possible. When doubt and defeat are allowed to take root, they begin to rewrite identity. The woman who once believed she could create now believes she cannot. The man who once dreamed now calls dreaming naive. The unguarded mind builds walls and calls them protection, not realizing they are prisons. But perhaps the greatest cost of all is wasted life. For every person who achieves something great, there are 100 who could have, but didn't, because they surrendered their mental gates too easily. They allowed other people's fears, failures, and bitterness to become their own. And so, without ever realizing it, they lived as a reflection of other people's thoughts, not their own. You see, life doesn't take your potential away. Distraction does. Fear does. Neglect does. The world doesn't have to stop you. It only has to fill your mind with enough noise that you stop yourself. The mind, left unguarded, will believe anything repeated often enough, and repetition is how mediocrity spreads. But a guarded mind questions, reflects, and decides. It knows that not every voice deserves belief, and not every thought deserves attention. The cost of neglect is not immediate, it's gradual. You lose direction first, then confidence, then peace, and finally the sense of who you are. And when that happens, even success feels empty, because it wasn't built from truth, but from noise. So guard your mind, not out of fear, but out of reverence. It is your greatest tool, your most faithful ally, and your most dangerous enemy, depending on how you use it. For when the mind is neglected, it controls you. When it is guarded, it serves you. And in that simple difference lies the distance between failure and fulfillment. The reward of mastery, how a guarded mind creates peace, focus, and destiny. When the mind is finally mastered, the world changes its shape. Not because circumstances suddenly become kind, but because perception becomes clear. Peace is not given. It is earned through awareness. Focus is not found. It is created through discipline. And destiny is not delivered. It is built thought by thought from within. A guarded mind is a calm mind. It no longer reacts to every whisper or shadow. It sees things as they are, not as fear imagines them. It walks through life like a steady flame in the wind, aware of the storm, but never blown out by it. Men and women who guard their minds begin to experience something rare in this noisy world: clarity. They can distinguish what matters from what doesn't, what's real from what's imagined, what's urgent from what's important. While others rush, they choose. While others react, they respond. And that simple difference between reaction and response is the difference between chaos and control. Focus follows peace. When the mind is still, its power multiplies. You begin to notice what you once overlooked. Ideas rise from silence like islands from the sea. Decisions become easier, not because life becomes simple, but because your thinking does. You no longer waste energy fighting distractions, because you've trained your mind to ignore them. The guarded mind also discovers strength. For years, most people draw their energy from emotion, excitement, praise, fear. But when the mind is disciplined, it learns to draw energy from purpose instead. Purpose does not waver. It does not depend on applause or conditions. It remains constant, like the sun behind clouds. And with that strength comes a quiet confidence, the kind that cannot be faked. You begin to trust yourself again. You think with precision, speak with calm, act with conviction. The world senses it. Opportunities gravitate toward clarity the way plants turn toward light. When your inner world is ordered, the outer world begins to align with it. This is the real reward of guarding the mind. Not escape, but mastery. You don't retreat from life. You engage it on your own terms. You become the author instead of the echo, the cause instead of the effect. You understand that peace is not passive. It is power restrained, focused, and controlled. In the end, destiny belongs to those who have learned to think deliberately. They no longer let chance, emotion, or the noise of others dictate their course. They know that every great empire of character, every achievement of purpose, was first built in silence, inside a mind that refused entry to anything unworthy. So, protect the gates of your mind, not just from the world, but from yourself, from the doubts, the fears, the lesser thoughts that try to steal your strength. Keep watch, stay aware, because once you master the inner world, the outer one cannot resist following its lead. So, your mind is the doorway through which your entire life unfolds. Guard it well. Every joy, every sorrow, every victory or defeat begins there, in the silent choice of what you allow to enter and what you choose to let go. If you let fear enter, it will rule you. If you let anger linger, it will poison you. But if you let truth, gratitude, and purpose dwell there, they will strengthen you, quietly, day after day. The world will always try to hand you its thoughts. You decide which ones to keep. You decide which ones to reject. That decision, repeated over time, becomes your destiny. Guarding the mind is not about closing yourself off. It's about staying open only to what builds, uplifts, and enlightens. It is the art of choosing peace over panic, focus over noise, and clarity over confusion. And when you learn to do that, when you stand watch at the gate of your own thoughts, you will find a power few ever discover, the power to stay calm in chaos, certain in doubt, and strong in silence. For the greatest victory is not over others. It is over the mind that once ruled you. Now it serves you. You are the keeper of the gate, and what you allow through will decide the world you live in.